got my lucky ducky. Thank you, JJ. I hear that there are people in the room watching me, and I just want to remind you this speech will be live right now and available later, so if you miss any notes, you'll know where to check. If you need to pause me at any point so that I could repeat something that I say today, please raise your hand and I will repeat it. An African proverb says, "Every story will glorify the hunter until the lion learns to write." So these words are for anyone aching to feel heard, for anyone aching to feel less alone. These words are about my story and the stories of countless women and men out there. These words are to elicit change in organizations and to propel those in positions of leadership to reassess their harassment policies and procedures. A few months ago, after a long day of braving to hide the agony of feeling silenced that I was in, a few words that I put out on social media took the world by storm. My Twitter and Facebook feeds were literally flooded with Me Too stories. So I looked it up. It was about abuse of power coupled with sexual assault and harassment. You'd think I'd be jumping up in joy at this point because someone finally started talking about this. But instead, I started crying. It was not enough at this point for me to say Me Too. What I needed to say was, I already said Me Too over a year ago, and this is what happened. So I did. Some criticized me and some questioned my intentions. Some accused me of lying, but so many others, including the New York Times, CBS News, the Times of India, Ditch the Label, and many, many more echoed my voice and said thank you. More importantly, many men and women all over the world said thank you. So for them and for myself, I will repeat these words now, Me Too. And I was blamed for it. I was told not to talk about it. I was told that it wasn't that bad. I was told to get over it. And today I say, I am so proud of myself for not allowing myself to take the blame for longer than I did, for refusing to be silenced, for honoring my healing by recognizing how bad my experience was. And I'm so grateful that I did not get over it. If you look at the cards in front of you, you'll find that in my first book, published 2 years ago and scheduled to be republished on March 27th, the end of the dedication reads, "To the silence in you, don't be afraid to break." And to live by my own words was the most liberating feeling. It was like jumping off a cliff and actually having wings to lift me. But as liberating as it was, the freedom to break my silence was certainly not free. It came with a price, and here's the price. You are a joke. You are asking for attention. Yes, you're beautiful, so sad you were rejected, a woman scorned, evil. You thrive on attention. You react when you do not get what you want. Get over yourself, girly. You have mental health issues. It is not worth it to get your popularity through this because I'm sure this is why you did it. So here's the catch. All the attention is on you, your character, not on what happened to you or on the perpetrator. And people's response to the victim usually is, well, you're the one who made the allegations. Of course that will be the case. The victim is the one who needs to break the silence, not the perpetrator. The victim is the one who endured the abuse, not the perpetrator. Phone calls upon phone calls and messages upon messages. You're going to get sued. You're going to get fired. Why did you do this to yourself? Your reputation is ruined. That's from the general public. From my own community, you are making us look bad. You are proving every misconception that is out there about us. And of course, no one will ever want to marry you. You can laugh at that if you want. Rewind a few months, sitting in my therapist's office. She explained to me that I was experiencing a form of abuse called gaslighting. Gaslighting, if you don't know what it is a tactic where a person makes a victim question their reality in order to gain more power. It is a common technique of abusers, dictators, and narcissists. This is how I've described it before. It's like trusting someone until they get you to the middle of the ocean, then being thrown in the water when you don't know how to swim. So you start to drown in an ocean of self-hate and self-blame, gasping for any ray of sanity. And every time you put your head up to ask for help, they push you back into the water until you surrender and become blue. But there's a little force inside of you that takes you back to the surface. But you only get there sometimes, if you're lucky. So when you do, you beg them to help you get out, but they don't. Then they tell everyone around them to look at you and how worthless you are. How could you get into the ocean when you don't know how to swim? This is abuse. So think again before you tell someone, get over it. After months of truly believing that something was wrong with me, after becoming someone that no one recognized, including myself, sitting in my therapist's office and listening to all of this, I started realizing it's not me. Nothing is wrong with me. All I knew was this. I was broken. Broken beyond what words could explain. Broken beyond what therapy could repair. In fact, there was no repair. There was rebuilding. There was recreating, reinventing. There was soul stitching, stitching with gold that needed to happen. All I knew at this time was that I was carrying weights that felt like mountains, so the most life-changing revelation came to me. These mountains that you are carrying, you were only supposed to climb. These mountains of self-blame and shame, of feeling silenced, mistreated, manipulated, abused, their weight was becoming heavier and heavier the longer I carried them, and the struggle had become a struggle of survival, not a struggle to triumph. So now that I decided to start climbing, I aimed to triumph. As I started seeing the truth like a sky clearing after a storm, there was a voice inside of me that was aching to be heard. I told people without telling them, and I was hoping that someone would hear, but no one did. In retrospect, it is my shame that kept me quiet, my fear that if those who loved me knew, they would take their love away as if I was not worthy of it anymore. I remembered the countless times I was told, no one will believe you, so you better stay quiet. So I stayed quiet until my silence broke me. After months of trying to heal from this, all I asked for was an apology, validation for what I went through. But I was told that there was nothing to apologize for. At this point, I decided to run away instead of fight. The plan was to quit my job and figure something else out because there was no way I'd grow in an organization where this man worked above me and there was always a chance that he'd be my supervisor or know someone who'd be my supervisor. When I expressed to another supervisor that I wanted to resign and explained why, I was told that this was going to be reported whether I agreed or not, and that my organization would protect me from this kind of behavior. Within 24 hours, I had to fill out a harassment complaint when I'd never even read the harassment policy. That night, I collapsed on the kitchen floor as I had a panic attack in the early AM, and I screamed for my mom to come. She lifted me off the floor and told me in what was more like sadness than frustration, "Something's happening with you and you're not telling us." At this point, if you can imagine, I'd lost all color from my face and my life. I had lost over 25 pounds over a few short months. Due to the emotional abuse I experienced, sleep on most nights meant nightmares, which affected so many aspects of my life. I was no longer the happy Najwa that my parents knew. In my mind, I told my mom, "Don't worry, it'll be over soon." That morning, I had a meeting where I was told that I'd be safe and protected moving forward. I was commended for my bravery to come forward and told that this will be a long road, but that I just took the right first step. My fear became drastically lower and I felt safe. I had trust that I would finally be heard. Everything from that point happened so quickly and I had no time to process before the doomed day that I was informed of the finding of no harassment. To this day, I don't understand how a harassment policy that defines harassment as vexatious comment or conduct that is known or ought reasonably to be known to be unwelcome did not consider my whole experience as anything worth alarm. So this is the price of sharing my story. My intentions are questioned. My character is attacked. I am accused of conspiring, and I am the one publicly attacked. When this could have all been resolved if there was accountability in any way. When I submitted my harassment complaint, I asked to never be in a position where this man held power over my hiring. And I was not even granted that because of the finding of no harassment. I understand that hearing this might be uncomfortable to some people in the room, and that's okay. This is my truth, whether you believe it or not. I no longer allow people's opinion of my truth to dictate my truth. So at this point, who do I blame? At this point, who do I blame? My organization, the investigator, everyone who knew but did nothing? There is no one to blame without consequences and implications on anyone but myself. And I'm going to tell you something. Just because I'm not allowed to blame anyone, I will not take in the blame on myself. Thankfully, I found a lawyer willing to risk rocking the boat, Philip Millar, who listened to me and told me to be brave, that it is tough to change people and that it's tough to stand up to powerful figures. But he believed in me and most importantly warned me of how there would be attempts to silence me with stern letters and threats from those who held power. He also assured me that we could overcome this. But of course, there's always a cost. It's the cost of sharing the truth. You get told that your truth is a lie. You get threatened to be sued for defamation. You get warned that you might lose your job. You get told that your own commentary on events is misleading. Excuse me, though. I do not comment on what happened to me. You do. I speak the truth of what happened to me, not a commentary of what happened to me. But if an investigation done says that no harassment happened, that must dictate your fate forever, being told that your experience is not worthy of any kind of accountability, and the voices of the critics and bullies will always be amplified by this finding. After this finding, there I was, standing in front of my students every single day, asking them to be upstanders, to stand up to injustice, when I myself knew that these were just words. When you do the right thing, when you speak up, you suffer the consequences. Those who I look up to, or looked up to, diverted the blame on me for someone else's actions, even though I spoke the full truth and admitted all of the mistakes that I made, even though I repeatedly apologized for all of the mistakes that I made that stood nothing compared to what I endured. So let me go on the record and say, no one chooses to be abused, and no one's experience of any type of abuse, whether it's power abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, or psychological abuse, should be minimized just because someone thinks that there are worse cases out there. There's a spectrum, yes, but it's all valid and it's all not acceptable. But here's the ugly truth. If it happened to you, they tell you that you asked for it. If you speak about it, they tell you that you're asking for attention. And if you get attention, they tell you that's what you wanted. But I wonder why they don't ask the abuser what he was asking for the day that he abused you. I've said it before and I'll say it again. It's easier for them to believe that something is wrong with you than it is for them to believe that something wrong happened to you. I ask every organization in this room, have you looked at the number of harassment complaints that were submitted to you? How many go through due process and how many have a result of harassment? Do you ensure that power imbalance is accounted for? Do you ensure that you have an investigator who's well-versed with any cultural elements that are integral to every case? How many times does someone need to be reported before your red flags go up? Do you take the time to listen and honor the stories of those who come forward? I will remind you that doing what's right does not mean that you preserve the status quo. You actually must disturb it. Change doesn't happen otherwise. When you see power abuse through the eyes of the vulnerable, it's different from seeing it through the eyes of the powerful. The vulnerable have no power to use or abuse. The powerful do. The vulnerable have no privilege to say no without fearing disappointing the powerful, but the powerful do have privilege. So why is the attention always on the person who endured the abuse? Have we forgotten that harassment policies should be in place to protect victims instead of silence them and enable the abusers? Have we forgotten that confidentiality should be in place to protect the victims, not to silence them and protect the abusers? Failure of our harassment policies and due process to truly take these facts into account leaves so many feeling silenced by the system, and it leaves the rest who may be experiencing similar situations wanting to stay quiet because they're afraid. Wouldn't you be? Take a few moments to let that sink in. That could be you, or your daughter, or your son. I understand that I'm not any of those. But if you took a moment to think that my father has a daughter, and my mother has a daughter, and my brother has a sister, and my sister has a sister, and my niece has an aunt, and my nephew has an aunt, you would see it differently. It's worthy to note that the cultural element of the Me Too campaign is missing. More often than not, old white men with law degrees are paid thousands of dollars to investigate an allegation. I suggest that they are not connected to the realities that we, the vulnerable, face, nor of the power dynamics that exist. To every person who had the ability to do something about this or say something about this and chose not to, shame on you. You let me down. You've chosen to be on the side of history that glorifies the hunter, on the side of history that allows oppression to continue. I remind you that the bad people win when the good people stay silent. And it's not only bullies who empower bullies, bystanders do too. Here's what I'll leave you with. If you are afraid of sharing your story, that's a good enough reason to share it, because you do not deserve to live in shame or in fear of the consequences of sharing your truth. If what happened to you was okay in their eyes, why is it not okay for you to talk about it? One last thing that I promised to respond to. I received a letter, not my lawyer, on Monday telling me once again to stay quiet, to retract my statement, and apologize for daring to speak the truth, or I will be sued. This came from a female lawyer with the Ontario Principals Council. It's a deliberate tactic of intimidation to serve me personally when you know that I have a lawyer. I will not be quiet after I discovered the power of my voice. I will not apologize for telling my truth. I will not be silenced after finally being heard. I am no longer a victim. I am a survivor. I'm a hero. I have my sister's lights surrounding me, and I have my spirit back. And you will find out, if you haven't already done so, that my wings are no longer broken, and that my soul is stitched back together with gold. I am not afraid to speak my truth. Time is up on sexual harassment. Time is up on sexual assault, on violence against women and men, on gender-based violence, on power abuse, on system oppression, on emotional abuse. Time is up on silence. I will end with the words of my sister, Jasmine Kaur. Scream so that one day, 100 years from now, another sister will not have to dry her tears, wondering where in history she lost her voice. I screamed as loud as I possibly can. Will you scream with me? Thank you.